This is SelfWork, and I'm Dr. Margaret Rutherford. At SelfWork, we'll discuss psychological and emotional issues common in today's world and what to do about them. I'm Dr. Margaret, and SelfWork is a podcast dedicated to you taking just a few minutes today for your own self-work. Hello, and welcome to SelfWork. I'm Dr. Margaret Rutherford. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been practicing in Fayetteville, Arkansas for 25 years now, and I decided a couple of years ago to extend the walls of my practice so that I could not only reach those who are already interested in therapy or emotional issues, but to those who may be slightly curious about what a therapist might say, but would never darken the door of one. In the comments and reviews I'm getting, I'm realizing that there's some of you who are very early on your journey with understanding your depression or your anxiety. And so I'm hoping that SelfWork is working for you. Today we're going to be talking about what I entitled Tina Turner Takes a Seat. But basically it's about what kind of attitude you have about aging. We're not going to talk about necessarily tips for aging well or aging gracefully, as they say. But we're going to be focusing on families, on how everybody getting older in a family can be handled in a really healthy way. I'll include a couple of stories from my own life where I was aware of what each generation could offer the other. It's an interesting way of looking at aging through the eyes and the lens of family issues than from only an individual one. Our listener email today is all about meeting the kids of the person you've been dating, how to handle it, and how definitely not to handle it. And of course, last episode, I began talking about my 100th episode celebration, and it's going to be all about you. This was a request or a suggestion from one of my listeners, and I thought it was great that I dedicate an episode to answering just your questions, to the best of my ability, of course. So email me at askdrmargaret@drmargaretrutherford.com if you'd like your question to be answered on my 100th episode. This is the 96th, so that would be in 4 weeks. So let's get down to talking about aging, something that so many people fear. Not only do some people fear aging, a lot of people are terrified of aging. It can happen no matter the decade you're in. Sometimes people turning 30 just think that something dreadful has happened, or 40 or 50 or 60. You don't know if you're going to have enough money. You don't know if your body will hold up. You fear being lonely. You fear changes that are occurring. You fear being unhappy with the person you're with, but you also fear not being important to anyone anymore, or walking into a room and feeling that you no longer make a difference, that you no longer fit in. You can feel really out of control or even invisible. But there are ways to combat this fear, and I think it takes an attitude change. We're going to be talking about aging in families, or perhaps I should say aging in healthy families. Years ago, I heard an analogy about what good psychological health looked like in families. It was actually the topic of a guy who ran a bunch of nursing homes, or now we call them assisted living homes, and he was stressing the importance of the person in assisted living feeling important to the family, but he played this whole thing out with an analogy. Think about it as if that family story is being played out on a stage. The central characters of the play are the parents. They speak the main lines, they have the most to do with what the play's about. The play, on that stage at least, is centered around them. Now their children run around downstage in front of the audience looking kind of cute, reciting a one-liner or two and getting lots of applause. But what about the grandparents? What role do they play? Why aren't they center stage? On this stage, their role becomes special appearance by. These days, it would be played by someone like Morgan Freeman or Meryl Streep. Their appearance, again, in a healthy family could make a marked difference in the play. They could be vital to the storyline. But they step down or step back from the central role in that family. They move over. They're no longer star of the show. What does that look like? The older generation supports and recognizes the need for their now very adult kids to become center stage, to have their own time in the spotlight. Now on another stage, their own stage with their own peers or in the community, they are and should be the central characters. But often, people are so afraid of aging, they won't step back. Maybe you're struggling with this. Maybe you have parents who are struggling with this. Maybe you have some friends whose parents are struggling with this. So when it's not working well, you might hear something like this or say it yourself. We have to go to Mothers for Christmas. I'd really like to stay home and create rituals for my own children. Or something like, Dad gets furious if I don't check with him before I invest in the stock market. Or, I'm in my 30s and Mom still tells me what I should wear. These parents aren't letting go of the centrality of their role. It's like they can't step back into that special appearance spiral. And that's simply not fair to the rest of the family. Of course, there are special circumstances where adult kids haven't matured and they remain needy, or perhaps you're a parent who are rearing your children's children. But healthier parents let go. They accept that they now serve a different role in their children's lives. That's what empty nest is all about, right? You back up, let go. Letting go takes awareness and intention. So now, of course, I've got a personal story to share with you because it was the first time that I recognized that I needed to follow this advice myself. It was at the reception after my oldest nephew's wedding, and I was doing my best Tina Turner imitation, which I actually love to do, when I suddenly remembered the above analogy. I looked around, and I was the only older adult. They were adults when they got married, but I was the only older adult dancing. So what did I do? I sat down, a little damp, and watched the bride and groom and their wedding party frolic their way through more of the evening. In fact, they did some sort of special dance. It was all choreographed. It was really cool. That happens at a lot of weddings now. At that moment, I must admit, I felt a little lost, like somehow I was now on the edge of life looking on, while others, quote unquote, lived. It felt odd, like a new toothbrush before you get used to using it. And I wondered if I looked old, sitting on the sidelines. But what I figured out now, and it didn't take me long, thank goodness then, what you figure out is the gift you do bring. What is special about your appearance in the play? Since that wedding, this awareness has become more important to me to have because my own child has graduated from college and moved to California. My nephew's families grow and weave in and out of my own life. So all of it takes an attitude change really for all of us. I'm not in charge, but I can also give the gift of my interest, my awareness, and my experience, if asked. Some of that obviously takes belief in your own worth. But I promise you, you're not going to achieve a greater sense of worth if the only reason your family is coming to your house for the holidays is because you make them. That's not going to make anyone happy. And if you're a younger person listening to this, dealing with this in a family is very important. Finding a way to let your parents or even your grandparents know, I love you, but I want to set up my own rituals at my own house. Let me host you this time. It's a huge change in a family when that occurs. But I again became even more personally aware of the gifts that the older generation can bring. My Aunt Mary, a woman who was in her late 80s at the time of this story, came to a baby shower that we gave for the same couple from the wedding, pregnant with their first child. I'd cooked jambalaya and had a table piled high with other dishes. And I served it with a big ladle from the table and jeans and an apron. But sentimentally, I'd also used my mom's favorite silver decorative piece in the middle of the table and some of her serving pieces. My mother was no longer alive at that time. Later that day, I called Aunt Mary to thank her for coming. What she said brought really quick tears to my eyes. I noticed all of your mother's things. She would have been so proud of you today. And then she said something I was only beginning to figure out and what I'm talking to you about today. She said, I realized today that I was there for you, not for the new parents, but for you. Now, I can be sarcastic when I feel sentimental or when I'm touched. And so my quick reply was to remind her that my mother would have wondered why I didn't have the party catered and would have been more dismayed that I wasn't wearing heels and hose. But Aunt Mary was right. She would have been proud. No one could have given me that gift except my Aunt Mary. Her appearance had been very, very special. So as you age, look for what you have, really no matter what your generation. Look for what you have, not what you've lost. What your role can be, not what it was. Who you are now, not who you were. Our email from a listener today is someone who has been dating a man for quite a while, but has not yet met his children. So here we go. Hello, I really enjoy your podcast. I'm in my 3rd year of graduate school studying counseling, so the podcast is helpful for me both personally and professionally. By the way, several comments and emails have told me that several therapists listen, or people studying psychology, and that just tickles me. So back to her email. I'm writing to see if you have any guidance or resources related to meeting the children of a widower. I met my boyfriend about 11 months ago. We connected instantly and have been enjoying each other since. It's really wonderful. I'm 36 and have been divorced for about 4 years. My boyfriend, who is a bit older than me, his late wife had cancer for 7 years, and he's told me that he experienced a lot of anticipatory grief. We met only a month and a half after she died. The 1-year anniversary of her death was last weekend. He has 2 children, both of whom were adopted. They are 13 and 10. Though I've not met them, I feel like I know them because I hear so much about them. I really care about them, even though I haven't met them. He's told me that he wants me to meet them, but he doesn't know how to introduce them to me or the idea of me. He's really trying hard to do what is best, and I certainly respect that. I do feel a bit of shame when people ask if I've met them, and I have to answer no. I project onto others that they take that to mean that we aren't very serious. I know that he does want me to meet them. He's just trying to do what's best for them and protect them from any more pain or confusion. I don't have any children. I'm pretty obsessed with my cats. I always thought I would be a mom. My ex-husband and I were married for quite a bit. At this point, I'm not sure that I want to have biological children, but I'm also confused about this. I'm very open to being a mother figure or whatever that might look like to these children. Do you have any recommendations for meeting the kids? Thank you so much. I thought this was a very interesting email and probably one that a lot of you can relate to. So here's my answer. Hello. First of all, you and your boyfriend are doing a lot of things right in my book. Waiting and giving the children time to experience their own grief has been important. And an introduction to you might have been really hard on them. I can hear that's been hard for the 2 of you, but I think you'll be glad in the long run. They probably didn't understand what was happening to their mom, so their loss was very raw and fresh, even though your boyfriend tended to anticipate her death. You're doing what you can to set things up for success. I've worked with several people who are in a similar situation, not all widows or widowers, but meeting soon after a marriage has ended. What has happened in those cases is that gradually you're introduced into the family as dad's friend or mom's friend. My advice would be to allow them to form their own relationship with you. They've already had to cope with being adopted or the loss of the biological parent. Now the loss of their mom. I take plenty of time for this to occur. There's nothing to be ashamed of at all. As far as having your own biological children, that's obviously an important choice. I'm sure you've talked with your boyfriend about it, and you don't say why his children were adopted. Perhaps he can't have any, but that's a whole nother topic, and one that could add stress to your relationship with his children and certainly between the two of you. For example, you needing them to love you. So I'd highly recommend that you and your boyfriend talk that issue out. You want to make sure that 10 years from now, you don't regret that choice, or at least as best as you can predict that. I don't know any books, but I'm sure they're out there somewhere. So good luck to you, and I hope that's helpful. Again, letting children take the time they need to get used to a death or a divorce is so important. A lot of times the person that wants the divorce will justify their actions and the speed with which they divorced, saying, oh, the kids will be fine. The kids will be fine. And actually the kids will act fine because they want to please you. They want to please their parent. So it's so important to wait and to give them time to adjust so that they can welcome your new partner in their own hearts before they learn someone has become an important part of their life suddenly without them making a choice. I hope that's helpful to all of you. Thank you for listening to SelfWork. I want to invite you to a new Facebook group that I have. I have about 325 members now, somewhere around in there. It's mostly women, a handful of men. Men are welcome. But we're going to be talking about depression, anxiety, perfectly hidden depression, just relationship issues. A lot of times people are not quite willing to ask questions directly, but you can send them to me at my email, askdrmargaret@drmargaretrutherford.com, and I'll put them in the group. But you can have access to me personally and ask questions of me and of the group. The way you get there is facebook.com/groups/selfwork. facebook.com/groups/selfwork. So I hope you'll join me there. Thank you for all the ratings and reviews. I'm almost reaching the 200 mark, which I said, 3 or 4 episodes ago that I would love to meet, especially by my 100th episode. I've tried very hard not to get all hooked into those numbers, but they do mean that people are encouraging me to continue. Because I still see patients every week, quite a few of them actually, and I love doing the podcast. So I hope you'll leave a rating, and especially a written review, because that tells me quite specific information about what you like or what you wish were different. And don't forget to send those questions in, again, to Ask Dr. Margaret at drmargaretrutherford.com. You can jump on over to my website, which is drmargaretrutherford.com. You can subscribe there and get a newsletter every week with both this podcast and my weekly blog post. That's all, I promise. I'd love to have you there. But you can also subscribe just wherever you are. Thank you so much for being here. Take very good care. I'm Dr. Margaret, and this has been SelfWork.